Danish policy recently toward the acceptance and the degrees of acceptance of refugees have stirred some debate, to say the least, among your counterparts inside the EU.
We stick to international rules.
What is international rule to you?
Well, it is that you should recognize people when they arrive, but the other side of that coin is, as I just mentioned to you, that if we know that that people have been walking through Europe, this is not the original idea of the definition of a refugee, and therefore we have to deal with that situation. So what Denmark does is to help substantially also in the neighborhood of the conflict areas, and we have put a lot of effort and a lot of money into solving conflicts and trying to secure people.
We have noticed that
in local areas, and that is in fact also the best idea, because you can help perhaps 5, 8 or 10 times as many if you help them locally. And of course it should be only a temporary situation that you are refugees. After that you should hopefully return safe home.
Is it fair that some of your European counterparts are accusing Denmark of not doing enough?
I don't want to get into that kind of a discussion. I'm sure that everybody recognizes that Denmark is among the countries in the world who are lifting surely about our weight.
The question is, the refugee issue, is it really strengthening the EU, or actually, as everybody is saying, dividing the EU? How much do you think this would further cripple the future, as some see, about the EU?
Well, I think that, of course, when you experience a situation like in 2015, where you had over 1 million people fleeing into Europe, of course that put the system under pressure, and of course you also put a lot of pressure on the solidarity among people in Europe, because it's not just a question of goodwill, it's also a question of ability to absorb that many people and give them a real chance of having a good life in Europe also.
What is the nature of this debate? Is this about the EU reassess yourself? Is this resetting the principles? Is it reassess your future together? Can you really do that?
No, I don't think that you'll see EU collapse or anything like that. We'll just have to face reality, and we'll have to give better answers. If we are those of us who believe in globalization, believe in free market, believe in the free movement of people, if we are not able to give better answers than we do today, then everything will be turned over to nationalism.
Hasn't it already?
Free market.
Hasn't it already?
No, I don't think so.
You got the Brexit, and then you've got the election in France, followed by election in Germany. Every one of them could be a little test of all the steps, whether the EU will still exist. Mr. Minister, what is the worst scenario for you, for Denmark? Are you prepared for the worst scenario?
It's a different situation if it's Geert Wilders, Marine Le Pen, or Alternative für Deutschland who wins, or on the other hand, if it is Macron or D66 or Schulz in Germany, of course the situation will be different, and you have different kind of politicians. But by the end of the day, I'm sure that we'll all stay together, defending freedom, defending free movement of people, and of course at the same time face reality when we have a Brexit.
But it's not just Brexit. It could be French exit.
It could be.
It could be, Germany.
You never know.
Debating about it, you never know. Do you have Plan B? What is the worst scenario for you? Can you prepare for that?
Well, I guess it's worse to be outside the EU than be part of the EU. So it's going to be a problem, I guess, for the British people. But look, I'm an optimist, and I think.
You have to be an optimist these days, right? If you want to be the foreign minister these days for the EU countries, aren't you?
But why not be an optimist? The history tells us that even though you have bumps on the way, you end out in a situation where everything is going to be better. We have more freedom in the world, we have more prosperity, we have less people starving in the world, and so on and so on. So you have to stick to that idea, and you have to also be able to talk about these progresses all around the world. And if you don't do that, and if I don't do that as a Minister of Foreign Affairs and as a politician from Denmark, well, I'm not as good as a politician as I should be.
China talk about being both a defender and a reformer of the existing system, international system. What do you make of China's role it cuts out for itself?
I really do recognize that your president was a defender of free trades at the Davos meeting. But still, again, we also have to find out what does that mean in reality then. Are we able to find good solutions so we don't have trade barriers between our countries and so on? This is really important because every time you throw away trade barriers of different kinds, people will become richer, and we will see more prosperity, and we will see more freedom, and more freedom of people, of goods, and so on is in its center a really good idea.
But some of the richest economies these days are not anymore, as their top politicians suggested, subscribe to globalization.
It's the same answer. It's not just listen to what they say or what they tweet. It's also to be really aware of what they do.
I understand that Denmark has been very active, both in participating in AIIB, one of the very first from the Western countries to be part of it, and also even about the Belt and Road initiatives. In fact, I was looking at the bookshelf of your Danish ambassador to China. On it, there's a big picture book called The New Silk Road. Obviously, you and your staff are prepared for that.
Well, there's a lot of areas, not only the two areas that you mentioned here, where Denmark can put good ideas on the table.
Like what?
For example, I know that you're very interested in our medical sector. You're also interested in how we have a work-life balance. You know, Denmark has been announced for 3 years in a row the happiest nation in the world. We can offer you good solution on sustainable energy solutions, clean water. There's a lot of areas, and even not only in these kind of areas, but we also have the best toys, as you know, Lego. We have the best clothes, bestseller, Viramora, and we have a lot of other things.
I can tell you're a great diplomat, promoting all these big brand names coming from Denmark.
But I know that these brands are already loved by the Chinese people, and I'm glad.
Let me ask you further about Denmark, because at this point, you signed an interesting contract with Alibaba to put all the brand names of Denmark onto their platform.
I'm really happy that we had 20 of the biggest Danish brands supporting this initiative from the very beginning, and we have had a really nice cooperation with the Alibaba up to yesterday when we announced it to the pavilion, and I'm sure that this will be for the good of both Danes and Chinese people.
Denmark is well known for its wisdom and designs, but geographically it's not necessarily the biggest economies in the world. But it seems that you have figured out some ways. For example, at this point, you have been very encouraging to establish some of the data centers, both for Facebook and, if I remember right, for Apple as well. So how does that work? How much policies, preferential, the government has to provide, central or local? And there has been controversies, to say the least, Mr. Minister, between some of these big name high-tech companies and privacy issue, for example, and also how they are using our data these days. What do you make of these complicated relations?
But what we can offer in Denmark is high qualified staff. We can offer a deliverance on time. We have a really safe energy nets and so on. And all these things together, I think, is the reason why Apple and Facebook choose to put their data center in Denmark, and we are very proud of that.
But that is not without issues, because you also have managed to send ambassadors to some of these high-tech firms. What are going to be the role of these ambassadors?
We have announced that we will have a tech ambassador.
Yes.
And this is a new idea that we have come up with, and I do understand that it has been debated all around the world and seen as a very good and clever idea. And the reason is, of course, when I met with Alibaba yesterday, it is perhaps today about among the 20 biggest economy in the world, also compared with countries. And perhaps in 20 years there will be number 5 in the world. So as a small country, we're only 5.5 million people. We have to be aware that we have to negotiate with countries, but we also have to be aware that some of these companies, even smaller tech companies, they can in fact have a big influence on Danish citizens' daily life, and therefore we have to talk to them and have diplomatic talks with them, because if we work together, we'll become richer. If we fight, we'll become poorer.
But on behalf of the people, what are you going to negotiate with? Are you already having some of the agenda for your ambassadors?
Well, let's give you a concrete example.
What exactly is written on their task list?
But when we're fighting ISIL, for example, in the Middle East, we have to deal with Facebook, Google, Twitter, and so on, because they will have to help closing down their accounts as quick as possible, so they cannot get even more people into these terror organizations. This is a concrete example. On the other hand, we just talked about it 2 minutes ago, the security issue on big data and small data and so on. So we have a lot of issues that we have to talk about and be sure that we find the right balance.
Do you think other countries can follow suit?
I guess they will.